time truly march forward? Or is that merely a limitation of our biology? We perceive entropy as an absolute law, the inevitable slide of the universe from order into chaos, from heat into cold. But the artifact currently lowering the ambient temperature of this examination room suggests a rebellion against physics. It suggests that with the right machinery, the arrow of time can be caught, held, and perhaps even broken. This is the Obsidian Watch, the only functioning mechanism recovered from the silent ruins of Sector 5. Let us break the seal on the containment unit and document what remains. The immediate sensory reaction to the artifact is not visual, but thermal. As the containment shield retracts, the sensors in the room register a precipitous drop in temperature. Within seconds, a delicate latticework of frost begins to bloom on the observation glass. This object is not merely cold in the passive sense of a stone left in the snow, it is actively predatory towards heat. It is a thermal singularity. To the naked eye, the casing appears to be carved from a single block of high-grade obsidian. It is jet black, lustrous, and totally opaque. However, obsidian is a volcanic glass, a material born of extreme heat and rapid cooling. It is brittle. It shatters into sharp, chaotic shards. The existence of this object, a perfect, seamless sphere of volcanic glass containing a moving mechanism, implies a manufacturing process that allowed for the manipulation of molten rock with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Reference Plate 1A. The macro lens inspection. The face of the watch is protected by a lens of transparent diamond lattice crystal. Beneath this unscratchable surface, we see the hands. They are not metal. They appear to be slivers of white bone, or perhaps a bleaching-resistant ceramic. They do not sweep in a clockwise motion. In fact, they do not sweep at all. They oscillate. The movement is jerky, agonizingly slow, and strictly dependent on the temperature of the room. When we introduce a heat source, such as this halogen lamp, the watch wakes up. The hands begin to twitch. The internal mechanism engages. This brings us to the central anomaly, the negative Kelvin gearbox. Standard timepieces are powered by the release of potential energy, a coiled spring unwinding, or a battery discharging. They add entropy to the universe. This device does the opposite. It functions by absorbing ambient thermal energy and converting it into mechanical order. It eats heat. We utilized a high-frequency terahertz scanner to peer through the opaque obsidian casing. The interior does not contain cogs and wheels in the traditional sense. It contains a suspension of crystalline geometric shapes, tetrahedrons and dodecahedrons made of a material that defies the periodic table. These crystals spin in a vacuum. As they spin, they pull energy out of the surrounding air, locking the molecules into a state of near absolute stillness. The watch is, effectively, a portable localized freeze ray. I find the implications of this power source deeply unsettling. To wind this watch, one does not turn a crown. One holds it. The warmth of the human hand provides the joules necessary to drive the gears. But because the efficiency of the heat transfer is 100%, the sensation is not one of warming a cold object, it is the sensation of having the life drained out of you. During the initial recovery at the excavation site, the Ashen Palace, the field archaeologist who first picked up the object suffered third-degree frostbite in under 10 seconds. The watch instantly siphoned the thermal energy from his skin, muscle, and bone to advance its hands by a single minute. It is a parasite. It trades seconds for warmth. The stratigraphy of the excavation site supports this conclusion of thermal manipulation. The palace was not destroyed by an explosion. It was perfectly preserved, as if encased in amber. The furniture, the tapestries, the food on the tables, all of it was found in a state of suspended animation, untouched by rot or decay. The bacteria that cause decomposition simply couldn't survive in the proximity of these devices. The Obsidian Watch creates a bubble of sterility. A zone where the chaotic breakdown of matter is halted because the energy required for that breakdown is being stolen to turn the gears. We are looking at a machine that measures time by stopping it. It reminds us that cold is not a force, it is an absence. And this machine is a master of creating that absence, leaving a trail of frozen, static order in its wake. Moving beyond the localized freezing of the gearbox, we must address the biological ambition of this technology. Why build a watch that eats heat? The answer lies in the physiological data recovered from the Hall of the Ageless, in the upper stratum of the excavation. The Obsidian Watch was not designed to merely tell the time, it was designed to deny it. We have long understood that aging is, fundamentally, an accumulation of entropy. Cells divide, errors creep into the DNA, proteins misfold, and the biological system slowly descends from order into chaos. This is the thermal destiny of all living things. But the aristocracy of Sector 5 refused to accept this decline. They wore these chronometers as medical devices. By strapping the Obsidian Watch to their wrists, specifically over the radial artery, they introduced a localized entropy sink into their own circulatory systems. The device did not just cool the blood, it filtered out the chaos. As the watch absorbed the thermal energy of the wearer's metabolism to turn its crystal gears, it generated a byproduct field of negentropy, negative entropy. It imposed a rigid, crystalline order on the biological matter in its proximity. The result was a halted cellular decay. The wearer did not age. They existed in a state of cryogenic perfection. Their bodies maintained at a precise, chilly equilibrium where the chemical reactions of death were energetically impossible. Reference Plate 2b. The osteological scan of Subject Alpha. Note the density of the bone structure. It is not porous or brittle like the skeleton of a geriatric human. It is dense, smooth, and laced with the same silica-based isotopes found in the watch casing. The user, a male of approximately 300 years of age, possessed the physiology of a 20-year-old, but it was a physiology transformed. The skin of these timekeepers lost its elasticity and warmth. Taking on the hardness of polished marble, their eyes ceased to blink, as the moisture required for lubrication was viewed as an inefficient waste of fluids. They became statues that breathe. But immortality is an expensive luxury, and in a closed system, the energy must come from somewhere. This brings us to the thermodynamic theft. The Obsidian Watch required a constant diet of joules to maintain the stasis field. The wearer's own body heat was insufficient. The watch would consume it all and kill the host in minutes. Therefore, the aristocracy had to feed their timepieces. We found evidence of this in the architecture of the throne room. The seats of power were not cushioned, they were conductive. They were wired into a massive, city-wide grid that siphoned thermal energy from the lower districts, the slums where the working class lived. The poor were the fuel. The Hearth-Servants, as the translation suggests, were citizens legally mandated to generate excess heat. They lived in subterranean warrens, operating heavy, inefficient machinery designed solely to produce friction and exhaust. They were kept in a state of perpetual fever. Their metabolic rates artificially accelerated by stimulants, burning through their lifespans in a matter of decades. Their body heat was harvested, channeled through copper conduits up to the palace, and fed into the Obsidian Watches of the elite. It was a vampiric economy. The rich stayed young by stealing the warmth, and by extension, the time of the poor. A year of life for a Hearth-Servant might purchase an hour of perfect, unblemished stasis for a dupe. I find the cultural artifacts associated with this practice deeply chilling. We found heat debt ledgers, stone tablets recording how many BTUs a family owed to the crown. Failure to pay resulted in thermal foreclosure, a euphemism for being cast out into the frozen wastes beyond the city walls. Conversely, cold became the ultimate status symbol. To be cold was to be wealthy, to be timeless, to be closer to the divine stillness of the void. The fashion of the era reflected this. The robes of the High Council were woven from spun glass and silver, materials that conduct heat away from the body. They avoided sunlight. They abhorred fire. Their language evolved to treat words like passion, warmth, and fire as vulgar obscenities. A compliment in their court was to tell someone they looked absolute. However, this obsession with stasis had a psychological cost. The preservation of the body led to the stagnation of the mind. When you remove the biological imperative of death, you remove the urgency of innovation. The art of the late period is repetitive, consisting of endless, fractal patterns that loop back on themselves. The literature has no endings, only recursive middles. They stopped inventing, they stopped changing, they simply persisted. The watch on the table before us is a testament to this stagnation. If we look closely at the dial, we see that the numerals do not count up from 1 to 12. They count down, and they do not reset. The mechanism was calibrated to count down to a specific theoretical moment, the 0 point. The moment of total universal stillness. They believed they were not just stopping their own death. They were piloting the universe back to a state of pre-creation perfection. The aristocracy of eternal stasis had effectively seceded from the timeline of the rest of the species. They sat on their conductive thrones, beautiful and terrible, watching the world burn itself out to keep their skin smooth. They were beautiful, yes, but when we tapped the chest cavity of subject alpha, it rang like a bell. There was no heart inside, just a frozen, crystallized lump of muscle that had forgotten how to beat. Pushed by a machine that had forgotten how to stop. The collapse of Sector 5 was not a war, nor a plague. It was a correction. The laws of thermodynamics are the only true laws of the universe because they cannot be repealed. Only delayed. The aristocracy of eternal stasis believed they had cheated the system by sequestering their entropy, pushing the disorder out of their bodies and into the world. They treated heat as waste, pumping it out of their palaces and venting it into the upper atmosphere via the massive cooling towers of the citadel. But heat does not disappear. It accumulates. For 3 centuries, the thermodynamic depth of the civilization grew. The atmosphere above the city became supersaturated with the displaced thermal energy of 1,000 immortals. The climate destabilized, the clouds boiled away, the sky turned a bruised, angry purple, and then, on the calculated date of the collapse, the debt was called in. We call it the ignition event. The concentration of waste heat in the ionosphere reached a critical threshold, triggering a cascade reaction that ignited the nitrogen in the atmosphere. The sky literally caught fire. The irony of their demise was absolute. The timekeepers, who had spent centuries cultivating a perfect, frozen stillness, were instantly subjected to a global firestorm of unimaginable intensity. The temperature on the surface spiked to 4,000 degrees Celsius in the blink of an eye. The Obsidian Watches could not process this surge. The mechanism was designed to sip heat, not to drink a supernova. The gears within the devices seized, and the stasis fields collapsed. But they did not fail gracefully. As the containment broke, centuries of deferred aging crashed down upon the wearers in a single microsecond. We found the High Council in the ruins of the throne room. They were not burned, they were vitrified. The intense heat had melted the obsidian of their watches, fusing the device, the throne, and the occupant into a singular, twisted sculpture of black glass. But look closely at the remains of Subject Alpha. The skeleton is not charred. It is crumbled, in the split second before the fire took him. His biology caught up with him. He aged 300 years in the space of a heartbeat. His bones turned to dust before the glass could even encase him. The city of Sector 5 is now a monument to this hubris. The buildings are smooth, melted blobs of masonry. The ground is a sheet of impact glass. It is a silent, sterile wasteland where nothing grows, because the soil itself was sterilized by the fever of the sky. They wanted a world without decay, without change, without the messy chaos of life. And in the end, the universe granted their wish. It gave them a world of perfect, dead glass.